Well, greetings.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Here we are. We're looking now at that camera.
And we back.
We are back, guys.
We're back at the podcast. All of us are back. And
The socially distant edition.
Yeah.
You like this?
I didn't know that this was for social distancing. I literally just thought Jason wanted his own table away from us.
I did.
This is
Actually.
just the way he
Anybody else.
prefers it.
I like having my own table.
I'm telling you.
I enjoy having
And
my
None
notice-
of the rest of us like to watch you having your own table.
I don't think the table
This
likes
is
you having
all
it.
my table right here.
That table is
I
violated.
may bring stuff and put it on my table.
I have a drink
I
on my
have a drink
table.
or do, and you have a drink.
I do
And
not have a
Nathan
drink.
doesn't.
We distanced Nathan from the Coke machine.
Yeah, apparently I did not get invited to be a part of that.
All right. So, missed you guys a couple weeks.
And it's been
Were
weird.
we- How many longs? How many longs?
How many weeks long?
Now, you know, when you're a little kid, they say how many sleeps you have. When you get older, it's how many longs do I have left?
I don't think they've said that in the past 30, 40 years.
No. I don't know
Maybe
what that is. How many sleeps?
our generations didn't get that.
Y'all didn't
memo.
say how many sleeps?
Never.
No.
Okay, well, I'm sorry about
Never.
that.
So,
All right.
but it's been a while.
It's been many longs.
It's been a little while.
Since
So,
we have all three been together.
well, I'm glad we're back, and this will
Lots
hopefully.
has changed.
A lot
yeah.
has changed.
A lot has
Not
changed.
just the tables.
Not
No.
just the tables, things.
I don't know. This has been the weirdest thing though so far. This is a little bizarre that we're all at
I
different
know.
tables.
It is.
The only thing I'm glad I'm outside the spit zone.
I get that.
You know, I'm not in danger.
People who have sat in the front row at Sharpsburg will tell you, you're not out of the spit zone. I'm just telling you.
You just point that way then.
Even you people at home, if you feel moisture, I have that
Oh
ability.
man. All right. So we got a lot to talk about
Yes.
these days. We've
Probably everything we want to talk about, we shouldn't talk about.
that's right. We're trying to be a little guarded, but we do want to talk about what's going on and what people are asking us.
Sure.
People have asked us some questions. Thank you
People
guys
ask
for
us
sending us some questions, and they're on topic with what's going on in our world right now. So we'll see if our opinions are worth listening to.
They probably aren't, but we don't
So,
give them.
here
'cause
they
we
are.
have the ability.
Yeah, that's right. So here we go. First question that we received is this: how can I encourage people who are anxious right now? And I love their comment. This is whoever wrote this. I love this. It says, "I want to shake them and say, 'Where's your faith?' But I need something gentler, obviously. So can you help me be a little bit
Obviously.
gentler than that?" So, who wants to take on that one first? Encouraging people who are anxious. How we do this?
You know, I think I would start, if it were me, and I have had this conversation a lot with people, I think I would start with, hey, I get it. And in my weaker moments, and I don't say that, that's probably the wrong way. Now I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud. I would start with, I get it. There's a lot to be anxious about, but when I settle myself down to what really matters to me, and I said this in the message Sunday, I know that at the core of my core is the fact that God has always been faithful to me. There were many, many times in my life where I have not been faithful to God, and He was still yet faithful to me. And there have been times where things happened that I didn't think were best for me, and God was faithful to me in those moments. There have been times where I concerned myself about things, and God was faithful to me. And so that's where I start. And then if the conversation starts, I generally, and I can stop at that. I go on to, most anxiety for me is about a desire for control. I want to, so I was talking to somebody a little bit ago, just before we had this, started this, about when this whole thing started. I, like lots of other people, you start doing research. I'm a researcher. I like knowing things. I want to know as much as I can. And so much of it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But even the desire I have to know is about me being able to control. And all control is an illusion anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't had control pretty much of anything in my life. It felt like I did. But honestly, it just comes back to I trust that at the bottom level of this universe is a faithful God who loves me, who doesn't miss one thing that happens to me. And ultimately, for followers of Christ, this world, no matter how scary it gets, is a perfectly safe place. The kingdom of God exists in this world, and it is a perfectly safe place for me to be. No matter what happens to me, because, Jesus even told me that if I die, which is the thing I concern myself about, or somebody I care about dies, that in the kingdom of God, I won't even taste the sting of death. Whatever the worst part of death is, being in the kingdom, that part has been removed for me.
Yes.
And so, God's always been faithful to me. I trust He will be faithful to me tomorrow. And whatever tomorrow or any tomorrow brings, I don't have to be anxious about it because of that.
And we were all talking about this the other day, and for me, and you guys echoed this as well, it helps when, in the times we're going through, is how I start my day as far as the thoughts that I begin thinking, because wherever I start from, I tend to roll down that hill pretty steadily, and if I can start my day off with the right kinds of thoughts, putting myself in the right posture, then I do better. And it was interesting because just today I had one of those moments. I, like many of the people that hopefully some of you are, who are in discipleship groups, we start our days off with God's Word, meditating on that, checking in with our disciples together. And so I did that this morning, and I just happened to be reading 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And this verse just jumped out. And it's interesting how things are taking on a completely different context now in the world that we're living in. And so I'm reading this chapter, and I read this verse. It's verse 9, and Paul's talking about the suffering that he's going through and the people that he's with. And he says, in fact, we expected to die. But as a result of this suffering he was going to where he expected to die, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely only on God who raises the dead. And I went, well, that's a good thought for the day.
That's a great thought.
Because I walk out the door and I go on to social media and there's a possibility that people can die. And that's always been the case, but now we feel it so much more because of the reality of what's going on. And here he's saying, well, through that, I was able to learn how to rely on my God, who I know raises dead people. And so that brought me a lot of peace walking out the door today, and I've sort of walked with that all day long. So that's been helpful to me. I know you guys had said same thing for y'all. Whatever better thoughts you start your day with tend to be what you walk with most of the day,
I think the thing that I keep reiterating to the people that I have the most influence with, I'll often just take them back to the teachings of Jesus, where Jesus would talk to people about worry, and then he would say these things that, if you take them at if Jesus didn't say them, you would think they were naive at best.
Yeah.
When Jesus says to people who are food insecure at the time, living under Roman occupation, where their lives and property can be taken from them at any time legally, he says to them, why do you worry about anything? And he says, well, just go look at the birds. And, if
really?
any of us heard Jesus say, we go, the birds? Do you know what's going on in the world? And you want me to go look at the birds? Yeah. But then I think about all the time, how God is just so evident in this, that, all of this is going on in our world, but it's springtime.
Yeah.
And the weather has been beautiful. Has just been, even yesterday when, at least when we're filming this was yesterday.
We tried to.
Yeah, we even tried to film it yesterday. And
the power went out.
The power went out. A lot of us had that. But then, man, it was like this one huge just show of like force of nature happening. But then the rest of the day was just beautiful. It was the perfect kind of weather.
Well, even that storm, I said to somebody afterwards, and I was texting some people in my neighborhood, and I said, the storm was horrible. Glad we still had power. But I'm thankful it knocked the pollen down because for the first time in days, I can breathe easily again.
Yes.
Even this thing that I thought, in a moment, is scary, it's terrifying. On the backside, God was faithful, and a good thing came out for me of that.
Yes. And I think Jesus just looked at the world, and he didn't see what we see. That, Jesus frequently talked about, his gospel, his good news was repent, because the kingdom of God has drawn near, and we know this. When he said repent, what he meant was just change your thinking. Go, turn around. Everything about the way you've thought about the world, it has to change. You have lived in the world your whole life thinking that danger is around every corner. You've lived your whole life thinking that things are out of control unless, like you said, I'm perfectly in control in every single moment. And Jesus said, the birds don't live that way. They don't worry about where their next meal is coming from. God feeds them every single morning.
Well, and you and I, Nathan, were having a conversation about my grandchildren, your children, just today. And it is a part of childlike faith. We read that and we think childlike faith. A child never thinks until a parent pushes it on them. A child never thinks, I wonder if Dad's going to be able to pay the bills. They don't.
Where are we
think
getting
that.
the money from?
Where are we
today,
getting
Dad?
the money from that? They just expect every day of my life so far. My dad has had something for me to eat. There's been a place for me to sleep. I can put my head on the pillow at night, and I believe my dad, until a parent falters or the kid gets to an age that we feel, okay, they can handle knowing that we're struggling and they may need to help. We don't expect that. And Jesus says all of us need to be like children in the kingdom. I just believe, hey, God's been faithful. God's been faithful. He's going to be faithful. If my dad decided I could be in this, he wouldn't have let me be in it if it weren't safe for me to be in it.
And what Jesus would say to us is, if you who are evil, or that's what Jesus says at one point when he's talking to people about. He says, if any of you ask your child asks you for a fish, do you give him a stone or a snake? And he goes, you're evil. Some of you, your kids should be worried about whether you're paying the bills or not. But they don't.
They're living with an illusion.
They're living with an illusion. But we have a perfect Father who, like you said, has always been faithful, is always in control. And to me, honestly, the beauty of this world, when you start to look through the eyes of Jesus, and even just the things you see in other people, there is, even in the midst of all this crisis, I know people are sharing this kind of stuff on social media all the time. There are people that are stepping up and taking care of people and noticing their neighbors for the first time and loving people. And that's the Father at work in all of this stuff. And I think Jesus would be walking around and he would see this stuff and he'd go, that's the kingdom and that's the kingdom. And man, aren't we perfectly safe? Things are bad right now, but you're perfectly safe. And so when you talk about thoughts, I try to do that. I try to at least every day have moments, not just in the morning, but throughout the day that I go walking and I just listen to the birds. And it's just like I sometimes chuckle to myself because I feel like it's God just going, yeah, look at the birds. Or I'll see the flowers in my yard, the dandelions that are growing up, and I can't tell my daughters that those are weeds and not flowers. But, my daughters think they're flowers, and so they pick them and they bring them over to me. Look at these flowers. And I'll say, it's beautiful. And they'll go, didn't God make great flowers? I'm like, you're right, God made great flowers. And
I didn't have to do anything. They just grew.
Now I'm going to poison them and
get
kill
rid of
them.
That's right. I'm going to get them out of our yard.
Yeah.
But,
I know for me, you mentioned, your thoughts and social media and all. I have to be aware of my inputs.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've got so many places that can be inputting thoughts into my life right now that I've had to be conscious. And I noticed this even way back when this whole thing got started and we were just starting to realize, this is a little more serious than we had probably anticipated with the virus. And I intentionally, from that point on, said, you know what, I don't necessarily think constant 24-hour news is good for me.
Yeah.
And I had noticed that it was also not good for my family. Because I'm the kind of guy that I like to have some noise going on when I'm at home, and I would just turn on the TV or something, and, just sometimes news would be on, and it was just constant bad news. And I started realizing that it was breeding a level of fear in my family, in my home, that I thought, that's not healthy. So I've been on it started, I was just going to do 2 weeks, and now it's probably going on 4, where I don't consume my news from that source. I get it from other places. In fact, what I found out is I'm getting it whether I want it or not. But it's just not as relentless, I guess, for me, and it has helped me, and it's helped my family to just be aware of those inputs, cut back where I need to.
Yeah, that's for me too. I had to cut back on that as well, of just on everything. Even in this time where, as a leader in the church, I'm getting all kinds of emails in of things we ought. There's a lot of ought.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of ought tied to it. And I already had a lot of ought in my own life as a leader. Leaders live with this you ought kind of thing. And I just had to, at one point, I just started deleting emails without reading them because I said, I already have all I can do. And you may be telling me something I ought to be doing. I can't handle your input. I just can't handle any more input and make any progress at all.
Yeah. I think every podcast in my feed has had something to do or something on this coronavirus. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I see it come through, and I follow a lot of podcasts for church leaders.
Yeah.
Here's what we need to do to respond in this time. And part of me goes, yeah, I need to make sure I'm doing it. But then I go, you know what? We got to do what's right for us and our situation. I don't need all that input, and even if I got it, I don't think it would help me in the end.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in the beginning of it, I had to really focus on, and again, wound up having this conversation with a neighbor of, where do you start on this? And so I am doing this little daily discipline along with the discipleship thing of my start morning routine now is, what do you know about God right now? And I always try to start the morning with, what am I sure about God? And then, so, He's faithful. He loves me. He doesn't take His eye off of me. He watched me the whole time I'm asleep. He's prepared a world that's a perfect place for me to rest and to thrive. And every challenge that He has for me, He's going to provide the strength that I need for that today. So I begin with that kind of stuff. And then I go from that to, so therefore, what should I be feeling about today? Mm-hmm. And it puts me in a total different mindset instead of starting the day with, I wake up in the morning and I go, well, it's another day and I'm going to have to go to the office and we don't know what we're going to do and there's a lot of stress on me, Lord, and I don't know how to handle this kind of stuff. See, that's all starting with my circumstance and me and my insecurity and those things, and it builds up in me, and then I vomit on the Lord. Yeah. Instead of taking in, here's what I have, and then I can say to Him, hey, I'm so thankful that you're with me, and everything that comes today, you and I can handle together. There's nothing that comes my way that I'm confident with your strength we won't be able to handle. It really helps me. Now, the truth is, by the end of the day, I've found in the worst days where there's a lot of bad news coming in, sometime around 7 or 8 o'clock, honestly, I do pretty good in the office because we're a team and we're working hard together, and we are working with that mindset. And then I get away from that, and it begins to wear me down, and I have to do a recheck. Mm-hmm. What do I know at 7 o'clock at night that's different than what I knew this morning? Well, the truth, nothing has changed, in my world between in the morning and at night about God.
It's just my thoughts have changed.
My thoughts have changed. He has not changed one bit. You and I joked one day, and I said, we were in the middle of 3 or 4 days where we had constant meetings. I mean, and I'm not saying this for anybody to think, because everybody everywhere was doing this.
That's right.
We were having meetings from 9 in the morning, and many of us were not leaving here till 5:36 at night. And it was one constant, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get in line? How everything's got to change. Small groups got to change. These groups got to change. Serves got to change. Everything's got to change. And it's a swirl. And I said to you one morning, I said, I realize there's one place that is not having any meetings. They have not held any meeting in heaven and said, what in the world are we going to do about COVID-19? What's going to happen with that? They just go, hey, man, sun, do your thing.
That's right.
Stars, do your thing.
And because of what Jesus has said, the church is going to just keep right on rolling too. God's not off his kilter. He's not nervous, and therefore we shouldn't be nervous either. Now there's challenges, absolutely. Yeah. We've got challenges. We got to figure this thing out. We got to do our best work, but in the end, we're okay.
That's exactly right.
So, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think one input that people have to be aware of too is your routine throughout the day and the way that just everything. I think, like you said, there's inputs that come from outside of me, but everything right now in our world is telling us everything's off because you're working from home and you didn't usually work from home, and your kids are at home and they're not going to school right now, and you can't leave and go anywhere right now. So everything about your day, not just social media, is telling you, everything is different, and it's a bad different. It's a scary different, and you need to be afraid. And so I think to some degree we have to start thinking through, even in our routines, or what are things I can do in my day, one, to get some kind of routine to my day, that I'm not waking up at 11 o'clock in the morning because I
don't wear pajamas all day until I take a shower and put on a different pair.
Because all of that is an input screaming to me, this world is different. And then I go, why is it different? Oh, I remember it's because there's this dangerous thing going on. Even the way we talk to our kids about it, I think we have to talk to our kids about it. But, I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and they'll often ask me, why aren't we going to school, or why aren't they going to school, or why can't we go to the library, and why aren't we going to church in person? We tell them, a lot of people are sick, and so that's kind of the way we talked about it. There's some sickness going around, and we're trying to keep as many people healthy as we can, and all that. And so we try to tell them the basics they can, but then always we try to remind ourselves, but you know what? God's in control of this. And they go, well, what if one of us gets sick? Well, then we get sick. And you know what? God's over that too, and He's going to love us through the whole thing. And being able to have those conversations and that kind of self-talk, and then to have things throughout your day that are just signposts to you that are different kinds of inputs. And it doesn't even have to be like a spiritual, every hour I sit down and read the Bible. It doesn't even have to be that. It could be, I don't wear pajamas. Like I come down and I have an office in my house, even if I don't have a home office. But, when I go home and work right now, I've got one of my work computers at home, and that's what that's for. We don't it used to be covered in bills and other kinds of stuff that we used to put there. It's not there anymore. And having those and I don't want to tell you what your thing is, but I think that's
you need to come up with a routine, because your body and your mind work together, and your soul is tied to your body and your mind. Yes. And if you're struggling in your soul, you begin with getting your body and your mind in the right place.
Absolutely.
I said the same thing to my teenagers. I have 2 teenagers at home, and I said, I'm letting them sleep in a little bit.
Sure.
But I said, you need to set an alarm. You need to, or let me get you up at a certain time, and I'm going to come in. We're going to wake up and get ourselves together, get on the computer, do whatever homework has been sent to you by your teachers, and get that part done. Have a segment of your day where that's work time, and then we'll come out and we'll have some free time and then family time at the end of the day. And it's been very, because I noticed when we weren't doing that in the very beginning, when we all kind of thought, we'll just get through this, and we'll just, and then we realized, this is going to be longer than we thought.
Yep.
We've got to build in some structure. And so once we started doing that, I could see a difference in not just their mood, but mine too. Everybody in the house, there's this rhythm to it now that we've got, and it's healthy, and there's we're moving around doing some exercise and all that kind of stuff. It's been helpful to us just all the way around. So
Same.
The last part of that question I was thinking about, we're talking about where the person says, I want to say, where is your faith? I think for those of us that are at that place, that's not the way it comes across is not very kind.
No.
It's not, it is the right thing for you to think, but it's more a discerning question for me in interacting with somebody. All of this does indicate to me, when I have those moments at 7 o'clock, I realize, I am on that OU of little faith.
Where is my faith? Yeah.
Where is my faith?
Yeah.
That's good for me to ask.
That's good.
And as a person who's trying to help somebody, I do now realize I need to work in terms of this person is struggling. I need to shore up their faith. But just saying to somebody in a rebuking kind of way and say, trust in Jesus, well, trust what about Jesus?
Yeah.
It's Jesus is right about everything, but give me the right thought here. What's the right thought? And so that's why it eventually came to me. God's been faithful. God will be faithful. There's nothing in this world. He never takes his eye off of me. That, for me, you must come to that thought. It's not the thought of, I have my trust in Jesus and one day I'll go to heaven. Okay.
Yeah. It's better than that, though.
It's way
better than that. The kingdom of God is more than that.
I said to somebody, God's idea was not, this is a dangerous world, and I sent Jesus
get out of here.
so you can get out of here. He said, this world is the world I created. I love it as much as I love you.
Take care of it.
And I want you to help recreate it. So he asked us to pray, what happens in heaven, bring it down here, and I'm the bringer.
Yes.
I'm the one to bring it. So I have to be the one that's saying to people, God's faithful. In this situation, God is faithful. We can trust him. Yeah. And we have to help each other do that.
Yep. And when I live in that reality, I do get freed up to do what you said earlier, focus on the things that I can control, and live in those with confidence and safety of knowing the rest is handled by my Heavenly Father who's taking care of all that. It reminds me of a story, not a story, it happened to me, but my wife and I were just talking about this the other day. You guys know this, but back in the fall, my wife had some pretty major surgery, and we went through a pretty scary time. And I'll just put it at that. For those of you who know me, know what we went through. But we're heading into surgery, and there's a lot of stress involved in that. And the day before, we met with the doctor and the surgeon, and he's going through all the stuff that we need to do and where we need to be and all that kind of deal. And on the way home, I remember my wife saying to me, she started asking me a lot of questions, what about this and what about that? And we were just spinning on lots of different details that we just didn't know the answers to. And I just remember, I believe it was a God thought. He brought this to my mind, and I stopped her and I said, hey, we need to stop talking about what we're talking about right now. I said, here's what you need to do. I said, you need to show up at the hospital at such and such time. You need to lay down on that bed, and you need to do nothing else. I said, because once you do those two things, show up on time and get in the hospital bed, I said, there are very skilled and very well-meaning people that are going to take care of you from that point on, from the nurses to the doctor to the surgeon to the anesthesiologist. All of that stuff is outside of our pay grade. And I said, so we just need to show up. That's all you got to do tonight or tomorrow morning is just show up. And we got home and she said, you know, you were right. And that's the best thought that I've had throughout this whole thing is I just need to show up. And we talked about that this week. And she said, that's a picture of the world we're living in right now.
Yes.
There are things that I can do, and there are things that God's got.
Yep.
And so I show up and do my part, and then I will forget the rest.
Well, you know, that's the part of when you talked about childlike faith earlier.
That's really good.
That is the childlike faith of it, of really the journey that Jesus invites us into is what my children do every day. They wake up, and I'm getting them dressed, and they go, Daddy, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? Are we going to school? Are we going to do this? And they just trust whatever I say to do, that's what we're going to do. And that really is the invitation of, it's this conversational relationship. That when we talk about a relationship with God, that's what it means. It's this conversational. I wake up and I go, so God, what's on the agenda today? Not what most of us do. Like you said, I come in, here's what I'm freaked out. Here's what I want to get done. You tell me, now you just go and you take care of it. I'm going to go do my own thing. It's, God, what do you have for me to do today? And if it's just, I got to show up to work today, or I got to work from home today, or you know what? I gotta wave at somebody from whatever it is for you, whatever the thing is. What is the next right thing that God wants me to do? And God's just prompting, go, hey, go do that. And I don't have to think through every possible outcome. I have to think through, I know God just told me to do this. I'm gonna go do it.
And the great part about following Jesus that I've learned over the years is when I do follow Him and have that childlike trust, outcomes are not my deal.
They're not my
He is responsible for the outcomes of my life, and therefore I can go, that's where that peace comes in. I can just go, wow, I'm doing what He told me to do, and the outcomes are on Him, and that's okay with me.
The burden is easy, and His load is light at that point, because I know, for me, in any of this, you know, I used to think it's my job to get this church and hold this church together, and when I preach, certain things need to happen for me to know that it was effective, all that. And the truth is, I've learned over time, I don't have much control over anything except in your analogy, I show up, I have my heart right that I really love the people I'm talking to. I am for whoever is out there, and now we're in a world where when I talk, I have a clue who's out there.
Yeah.
I'm just talking, and in my mind, I make up a person, which y'all find weird, I know, but I make up a person that I am talking to. Yeah. And I trust that whoever's watching it, God is doing the outcome part. The outcome part is on God. It isn't on me.
Yes.
And at that point, I can release it. I can walk away, and when people go, you said such and such, and I go, well, yeah, I did, but I'm sorry.
I was just trying to be faithful.
And really, I meant it to be loving, and I'm sorry it didn't come across that way. I'll try to do better next time.
Yep. All right, here's another question, moving on from that, but a little bit different angle. Somebody asked this question. They said, well, everybody's telling us not to be afraid. And I think we said this, that's like Jesus' number one repeated command. He said that more than any other command. So we're not supposed to be afraid. However, the Bible says we ought to fear God, and it says we're fearfully, wonderfully made. So let's talk about the difference between those kinds of fears. Is there a difference, and if so, what is it?
Well, you know, I don't want to be the first one every time, so somebody else talk first, and then I'll come in at the end. You know me, I have things to say.
Oh, we know you do.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer is just it's a difference in language. I often say this, and whether people like it or not, I say this to our students all the time. Like, English is the worst language, and we shouldn't have.
It's the worst.
It's the worst language. We have one word. We have one word that means 17 different things.
True.
Exactly.
And so when you use it, anyone can twist it around. But Greek is a different thing than that. When some of these are in Hebrew, which is a different, and certainly even even those of you who took Spanish in high school, you get that they have different words for different meanings, and we often use the same. And so fear in this case is not fear in the sense of terror or.
Well, and even getting into that, I'll just go for this, and this is true in Greek and Hebrew, but it's true even in modern language, like we've learned in Haiti, in Creole. They don't have pronouns. They have a pronoun that can mean he, she, it, they. One pronoun, you have to understand it by the context.
Right.
And Hebrew and Greek are similar. There are words, and in the context helps define how that word is being used.
Yes.
That's right.
That's what we have to get to on this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean that was my contribution. Is we're not talking about the fear when you said the thing about Jesus said don't be afraid. He's not using it in the same context that they're using it here. That fear in this sense is more about respect or awe. That I'm understanding this is a power greater than myself. That there is a sense of fear, once again, not in of terror, but in an understanding of this thing is so much greater, so much more amazing. And then certainly with being fearfully and wonderfully made is that God took great care, this respectful kind of care in making us. So it's just a difference in language.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in terms of, that when we talk about fear and I'm afraid, so we have the coronavirus, we have the situation we're in, every day there's something new. It causes me to feel afraid, and what it does is it begins to cloud what I know to be true, like I was talking about. I get away from the world's a perfectly safe place. God has been faithful to me. And so this fear, this feeling I have gets between me. And so the angels come and say, and Jesus says, why are you so afraid? One of the famous times is the disciples are in a boat. They're in the middle of a storm. They think they're going to die. And Jesus is sleeping in the same boat where they think they're going to drown.
That's right.
And they just told him before that they thought he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
So you got God in the boat. He's in the boat. And you're afraid you're going to die. And Jesus wakes up and goes, why are you so afraid?
Yeah. Why are you
And
afraid?
then he calms the sea. And then the next verse is even better. It says, and then they were really afraid.
They were really afraid.
They thought they were afraid of the storm, and then they go,
afraid of you.
Oh my gosh, we got God in the boat.
Yes.
Yes.
I got really afraid there for a moment, and that's just the two
Comparatively, that is a better kind of fear. Though.
It is.
But
at a moment, I realized, and I go, oh my gosh, I'm in the presence of God, and that's where the first one is. I'm in the presence of somebody who's bigger and more powerful than me, so they have rights that I have to acknowledge. But when I take something that I'm afraid of and I give it right to my decision making, it is getting a right to me it should not have.
Well, and I think it's the difference. Once again, and this can be the soundbite for me for the whole time. English is the worst.
He's like Debbie Downer.
I often will talk to people and they'll say, fear is actually a good thing because it's a physiological response, and you should be afraid when you see a venomous snake, or you should be afraid. But see, that's once again the problem with the English language. The kind of fear that he's talking about, that is a state of being. It is I am bringing fear as the way I approach the world. The other is a physiological response. We probably should have two different words for them.
We should.
Because the other I would actually call closer to wisdom, and that if I touch, because that's what it is. When a child approaches a hot stove and gets scared from going to the hot stove, that's wisdom saying, if you touch that, it's going to burn you.
Yes.
But the fear you're talking about is a state of being, which I go, because I was burned one time, I'm not going to touch anything ever again.
Exactly.
And it's a paralyzing state.
Yes.
Paralyzing
It's
state.
not they're not the same word. Jesus never said live without wisdom. And certainly in the times we're living in. He never said live without wisdom. Throw caution to the wind, just do whatever you want to do.
Don't wash your hands, don't do anything.
Yeah,
that is not what he's saying.
No.
That is not what he's saying.
But what he's saying is do not live with the lens of fear as the way you approach. And it's the same with things like anger. Anger, when someone wrongs you, is appropriate. It's a physiological response of your body saying you need to move towards that problem and do something about it. But anger as a state of being that every person I view through, because someone wronged me in the past and I can only ever see them through that lens, that's when Jesus says, hey, you're in danger of the fires of hell when he talks about anger in that way. He's not saying, someone said something and it rubbed you the wrong way and you got angry. You're wrong because you had a physiological response.
No.
Yeah.
It's just they're two different things. English is the worst.
Yes. Thanks for that, Nathan.
There you go.
All
You should
right.
all speak something different. I don't know. Pick something.
I'm not going to do that.
I'm just
sticking
saying
with
someone
you.
else pick something. Y'all pick it.
it's
Send
way-
it to
Here's
me.
what I'd say. I'm at this age, I figured out I'm not capable.
No,
I have not even conquered English yet. I barely can speak.
No, that's
I'm way too lazy to
Yeah,
get
that's
involved.
true.
in that.
Both
Okay.
of them have to, if I write something, they both go, what language were you writing in?
Yeah.
They have to correct every bit of it. I can talk fine, I just can't apparently spell.
I don't know about that.
Good point. Good point.
We'll let you live in that for a minute. That's your delusion.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right.
We got another question here?
We have one more question. It is a hard left turn, but
Oh.
not so much. It is about the virus. It is about the virus, but
Okay.
it is a little bit different. People have asked, well, not asked me, but they've mentioned to me, and I've seen this pop up a lot. Is a lot of people, especially us, Christians, feeling as if here we are in this global pandemic, and is this some kind of fulfilled prophecy? Is this a sign that we're in the end times? And how do we think and feel about that whole thing? And I know y'all got some opinions on that, as well as I do. So,
Well, we both start on the last one. Jason, you start on this one.
okay.
Great answer, Nathan.
I do have opinions.
Because
on
I got
that.
things to say, and I've already made everyone angry with the English is the worst thing. They're coming
Or
at
you
me.
may not. We don't.
I don't know.
End-time prophecy is the worst.
Well,
I'm not going to
unless
disagree with
Jesus
that.
did it.
Wah,
I'm
wah.
not going to disagree. I heard a guy that I'm really enjoying getting to know his thoughts these days, a scholar, author named Greg Boyd. And I was listening to him the other day, and he was talking about this, and I thought he had a really good point that I don't think a lot of people think about these days. His point was this. He said, whenever we latch on to some kind of global event and we immediately think, oh no, it's the worst, and this is what the Bible was talking about, he said, often we do that in almost like a vacuum because we don't consider all of history when we think about that. And what he meant by that was he said, this is not the first time that we've had pandemics like this. He said, we just live in a time in our modern culture where we have been insulated from them for so long that we think that this is not a regular occurrence. He said, but if you lived back in Middle Ages or even before that, he said plagues ravaging your community were a pretty regular thing. He said, and way worse than this, numbers were higher of people dying and getting sick, and I'm not downplaying what's going on in our world now at all. I'm trying to give it perspective, and his point was, if you lived in those times, you would have thought the same thing. He said, but that wasn't a sign of the end times, and they had much worse plagues and much worse death going on around them, and they were suffering way worse than what we are in this country. He said, so I don't think it's very wise for us to automatically pin some sort of end times sign onto what we're going through when it kind of pales in comparison historically from what we know has been going on. So that would be my first thing to say is slow down a little bit and let's put this into perspective and maybe think more historically about this. That's my first thought on it.
That's really good.
So,
Yeah, I think that's
really
good.
Yeah, I told you when you were sharing that with me in the office the other day, I thought that was so wise. I remember reading a book years ago called Reading the Bible Through, I think it's either Easternize or Westernize it. It's written in an Eastern culture. And the guy was talking about, he's from the U.S. like we are, that when he began to go to the East and he would listen to people in the East teach the Bible, my favorite parable, I taught, first 10, 11 years of this church, I taught on it at least once a year as the parable of the prodigal son because I've always felt like that was my story. I am the prodigal. God brought me back and I blew everything that should have been a great inheritance. And he said, that's where Western people tend to hear that story. The son was given a lot. He went off in wild living. He left and he finally repented and came back to his father. He said in the East, where it's very common, the part that we miss that they see is that it wasn't the blowing of the money that got the boy back. It was blowing of the money and a famine hit the land. Because they're so used to famines in their world, they go, oh, of course, a famine.
It happens.
You realize it happens all the time.
Yeah.
But Jesus put it in the story, and that's what brought the guy back. And, I'm 60 years old. This is the first one of these events I've ever had in my life in the Western world.
Sure.
But it isn't the first time African people my age have been through this kind of thing.
That's right.
They have gone through it already. And I think even in terms of when you talked about people, that watch children die and that, one of the big eye-openers for everybody that goes on a trip to Haiti with me is we go to people's homes. And, the very first year we were in the one village we went to, I met a man, really liked him. I wound up sponsoring his son, didn't realize it at the time, got to know him. He was one of the leaders on the council. He was late 30s when I met him. And 2 years later when I came back, he was dead. Because he had gotten a disease. Malaria had gone through their culture. He had died. His family was now without that. You talk to some of the moms in that community who their husbands have already died, and when you ask them how many children they have, they will say 2 living. And when you ask them how many, often they've had 11. But they have more that have passed, and they are still thriving and going, and their faith in God is strong. But we live in such a protective world that we think everything's a sign of the end times, everything's coming to an end. They haven't seen any of those things as a sign of the end times. I'm not sure why we should either.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's my response to your thing.
Yeah, and my other thing that I've said to many, many people, I says, we forget we've been living in the end times ever since Jesus left.
That's right.
and the writers of Scripture were saying, these are the end times. So, and what they would mean by that phrase is that all conditions have been met for the return of Jesus. It could come at any time.
It's hard to read Acts 2 when the very first message to launch the church Peter says, in the last days, these things will happen.
And it was
and
happening.
he's saying the prophecy from the Old Testament was fulfilled that moment. He said, this is the last days.
Yes.
And that's why a little bit I jokingly said end-time prophecy is the worst. This form of end-time prophecy where everybody's looking for something and the birth of the nation of Israel and this happens over here and we put it on a thing. And I grew up in one of those churches where there are charts on the wall and those kind of things. We look for signs of the time and all that. That's a fairly recent way to look at this. That has not been historically the way around the world that most Christians have looked at it. And so we look for this kind of stuff, and so far, everybody's been wrong. So the chance of you being right now, I'm just saying,
small.
Somebody's going to be right one day, I guess.
Sure.
But this probably ain't it.
Yep.
But even if they were, and this is where I always come back to, is what does that change about how I live and how I exist in the kingdom of God, who and how does that change the way I treat my neighbor, and the command of Jesus? Is it now different? Do I now stop loving my neighbor and start hoarding? Do I run down and start buying up guns so that I don't know? It's okay now to shoot people. I don't get that.
I don't get it either.
How does that change Jesus' clear command? Follow me until I get back, and while you're going, here's what you do. Love people the way I've loved you. And that's it. Yep. That's your marching orders. And just hang on, I'll be back.
Yeah, you remember, Jason, you were younger on our staff when
Yes.
Y2K was starting.
Y2K,
And this building didn't exist. We were just in the process of building it. And there were people in our church at Y2K, again, sign of the end times. Somehow God hadn't figured out computers. Computers were going to end the world. And everybody, we had a whole group of people that started hoarding and building these compounds and buying guns and night vision and storing up stuff and telling me it was in the book of Revelation. And so being younger and way saltier back in those days, I decided I would, for the first time ever, I taught through the book of Revelation, and I timed it out so that we wouldn't finish the book of Revelations until the first week in January 2000. Because I said, I'm going to be here, and I guess if you guys aren't, I'm going to be teaching the book of Revelation. Y'all be in your compound. And, all that kind of stuff. Just salty Ed.
So gentle, Ed.
So salty boy. And, the whole thing, it came off as an embarrassment. And I said to them, you're going to put barbed wire? Aren't Christians supposed to be the ones sharing? You're going to shoot somebody? Seriously? I don't get that.
Me neither.
I think the only thing that when you talk about seeing anything as a sign, is it's a reminder. And once again, this is how I talk to my children about it. It's just a sign that there's still brokenness in this world.
Yes.
And that, Jesus didn't just come to heal my brokenness. He came to heal the brokenness in the whole world, including creation itself, that all of creation, as Paul would write, is groaning. This is some of that groaning. It's the world is still broken. It doesn't mean that Jesus isn't king. It's that Jesus has given us marching orders to join with him in the act of restoring the world to heaven on earth, bringing heaven here, and that we're a part of that kingdom work. And so when I see these things, I don't look and go, oh, well, that must mean X, Y, and Z. I just look and go, yeah, this isn't a shock to me that the world is still broken and that people are still hurting, because people are hurting all around the world. And just like we go to Haiti to help people, and just like we support Bridging the Gap here to help people here, and just like I should be loving my neighbor and I should be doing that, none of that has changed. That is still going on.
I had somebody say to me, I think it's a sign of the end times, and I'm really concerned about my relatives that don't know Jesus. The end result of that is good, but the fact that it took you thinking about the end times, your marching orders were the same the day before you thought it was the end times and the day it are. And I'm not saying they weren't concerned. I guess they think the clock is running. The clock was always running because we had this illusion that I knew what the future was like. I have not one moment in my life ever known what the next moment held. We have this illusion that I know what the next moment holds. I don't know what the next moment holds. Every moment is my end time.
Yeah.
every moment. That's the only moment I have, is that moment.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the difference between the way when you talk about reading the Bible now through those eyes, and I talked about this to a group of people. Every time I used to read the New Testament, I understood they had an immediacy that I didn't feel, that they felt about everything. Yeah. I mean, they talk, because they would even talk about things like, it felt like Jesus coming back at any moment. Now I look back and I go, it's been 2,000 years. They were off by a long shot. It's like, but they felt this way because they understood this is an immediate need. Nothing changes. This is an immediate, my need to love my neighbor, my need to take care, to help share the gospel with people, all that kind of stuff. It's always been immediate, but there is something now, and this may be one of those things where you look and go, hey, God's at work in this, of all of us now suddenly feel immediate. You're calling relatives you haven't spoke to in a long time. Yeah. You're doing video chats more regularly with people that you probably should have been before, and maybe now you are starting to think about things that maybe you should have been thinking about before. It's always been immediate, but it does feel immediate now.
Yeah, I just wonder if they felt more immediate. I hadn't thought of this until you were talking about it. And I sense this a little bit even with people in Haiti. They have a real push to get their country to be better in their ilk. But if my thought of my life, I'm 36 and I could get malaria and I'd be dead next year, I do have a more, whereas in our country, in our world, we really think we're owed 70, 80 years. And even when an 80-year-old gets sick, we go, oh my gosh, they got pulled away. So I'm like, they were 80. I'm 60. In the world's history, I'm on borrowed time. True.
True.
But we don't think about it that way.
Yeah. Well, the way it comes down for me, this is my final thought on it, is, and I've said this to people before, said, okay, let's assume it is. Let's say it is the end times, all right? I would much rather Jesus catch me doing his stuff, staying faithful, loving on people, and continuing the work of his kingdom and of the church, than I would rather have him catch me huddled somewhere in fear, hoarding with my guns. Yeah. I just if I have to choose, let's say you're right, and I have to choose which posture to live in, I'd much rather live in this one over here.
That's a great final thought on that.
That's a great final thought.
That's exactly right.
Well, thanks. Okay.
I've become more encouraging since the virus.
You have.
I'm very encouraging. I'm uplifting coming
Look at you. All right.
Still salty.
Yeah.
Nothing gonna change it.
Not as. I've been around you now for, 24 years?
24
We've been together 24 years. And
not quite as salty.
Not as. I think we're both a little less salty. So, okay, and we'll move on. So, no top 5 for today, but
we tried to come up with something about quarantine or any of that kind of stuff.
We didn't know what you guys would think were funny.
Yes. So here's what we want. We want you to send us some top 5 ideas that you want us to hear.
And they don't have to be related to anything going on in the world.
Anything.
We just want some good
ideas.
ideas.
We used to have a staff member that would say to us regularly, tragedy plus time equals comedy. And my problem has always been I've never known how
Time.
long the
How long
time
the
was.
time.
Because
The
for
equation.
me, things are funny pretty
Yes.
quickly.
Yes.
Don't take much time for you.
I have noticed, and I was telling you guys this, I have noticed, I have discovered some things about myself in quarantine
Okay.
that I was surprised about.
Tell
you
us,
know.
Jason.
I think this is not funny. This is kind of good. I've noticed that, you know, we really enjoyed time with my family. That's been a good thing.
That's been good.
But,
Same here.
You know, we're kind of forced to, like last night we didn't have power, you know, so we're in the dark, and so I thought, man, this is ugh. So we're not only locked in this house, now we don't even have lights or internet or anything, and that's pretty awesome. We had a good time.
Good.
You know, I wouldn't want to do it for too long.
Yeah.
But we did okay. But then there's some just silly things that I've realized. I thought the
Give
other day,
us a silly thing, Jason.
I need a haircut. I think about
People
that.
have been
for a
telling me
while.
I need a haircut.
I need a haircut, and I'm like, how am I going to get that done? And I certainly don't trust myself to do it. I don't trust anybody in my house to do it.
He trusts me.
I was
So-
about to invite some of you who think you want to cut Jason's hair to volunteer to cut Jason's hair, but then I thought, I like Jason, and he might not trust you even if I trust you.
I might not. So I'm thinking on that these days. It's starting to get into my ears, and it's bugging me. And I'm
If
like,
you would like
I need
to
a
apply
haircut.
to cut Jason's hair, would
don't
you
know.
send me a personal email? And I will try to convince him.
I don't like
that,
this.
that
No,
you
this
should
doesn't
cut
feel good.
Jason's hair.
So, but I shouldn't worry about that. That's just,
You
but
shouldn't.
I shouldn't. I'm just
Your
gonna let it
hair
grow.
may become like
gonna
Nathan's
let it
hair.
grow out.
Eventually,
grow
you
out.
could become like
And I've done that
Nathan.
before.
Okay.
It wasn't good, but I let it grow
Not
for a
good-
while.
it's not good on
So,
me,
you
but
know,
what are you gonna
have
do?
y'all discovered silly things that you're worried about
Well,
these days?
as I
that-
said to you when you were telling me we might talk about this, I have not discovered things about myself. But
He's not very introspective. That's what we're finding out.
No.
people tell me things. My wife has kindly told me I have become the person people avoid because I like to talk to people, and now everybody is really a little hesitant. I'm just talking to everybody.
You're not hesitant.
I'm that dude, man.
that creepy old guy.
How y'all doing? How you doing? It's good, man. It's good to be out today, isn't it? Aren't you glad to be out today? Look at that. Hey, how you doing? Look at that dress. Isn't that a pretty dress? I'm that guy, and everybody's
It's the
like,
creepy old guy.
Yeah, so
Creepy
I
old guy.
I have plenty of more than 6 feet clearance all around me.
There you go. There you go.
Actually, some of it's worked out. I told about some of the stuff I'm doing with neighbors. Today, one of my neighbors brought me some goodies, and they said,
how
this
cool.
isn't going to be good for you, but it's good. And I thought, I know
doesn't matter.
exactly what you're talking about.
Don't
So
matter.
I'm looking forward to getting that when I get home later.
Yeah. That reminds me, that's something I discovered about myself. When I don't have anything else to do, I cook a lot. I am baking.
What's a good thing you
and
cook recently?
cooking. Well, this week I made I tried to make up like a cookie recipe last week. Didn't go so well. They were not good. So this week I baked this. It's called a Oreo cake. It's chocolate cake, and then of course you pour like sweetened condensed milk over the top of it, and it soaks down in there. It makes it really gooey, and then there's like this mixture of whipped cream and cookies and cream pudding and broken up Oreos all in the thing. We're eating on that right now. It's amazing.
It sounds good.
I just keep cooking. It's like I sit around the house and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, we've got this in the pantry and I could make that. And then I go into the kitchen. But I cook. That's my thing.
Yeah, I know
I
you
cook
like
for.
to cook.
I'm the cook of my family. So I've been cooking a lot, which is probably not good. I'm eating more, so that's not good.
Nathan, have you discovered or people have told you things about you?
I don't know. Nothing silly. All my stuff is either depressing or really good. So I don't know. I have started. I've learned I like to run outside. I've been going to the gym the past couple of years, and I run on the treadmill. And I always thought I wouldn't like running outside, but I like it way more. I live on a golf course, and so I go run the golf course every single day. And
I live with several runners, and they tell me that they said they'd much rather run outside than
yeah,
on a
I
treadmill.
thought it was going to be significantly harder. I actually think it's a little easier.
They say that.
Yeah, I actually think it's a little easier. And so-
Mentally, it's easier, too.
It certainly is. It certainly is easier mentally because there's more to look at and there's more going on. And because I live on a golf course, I also didn't realize how close most people's houses were to the golf course. I'm running on the golf course. There's some people that they're just out like just coming outside, walking their dog, and their dog's inches from me. And I thought, I would not want to live at that house. Man, a golfer right in my yard. I got a little bit of distance between my yard and the golf course, but anyway, I enjoy that. So I don't know.
Well, I think we have burned up enough of these people's time that
They got nothing
Also-
else to do.
nothing else to do with.
I'm also supposed to be on Instagram Live right now, so I can start that in just a minute.
All right, well,
Now,
we'll
for our
let you-
students out there.
We'll let you get to that. So,
All right.
But Sunday, we're going to be back 10:30 online. Join us, invite somebody, and hopefully it won't suck.
It'll be good. It's going to be great.
I hope so.
That's
We're
always the hope.
We're trying to learn things
We
and
are.
get better at this new thing we're doing.
We
Yes.
are.
All right. So send us stuff. Tell us what you want.
Top
Continue.
5 things you think might
Or
be
stuff
funny,
you
humor
wanna
that
talk
might
about.
work.
That's right. So thanks for joining us.
We love you.
See you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.